Sariah, and it is 10:26 where we are at. It is late, but we missed story time yesterday because she was at her godmother's house, and today she's back home and she's up. So I asked her, Dad, I'm like, would it be inappropriate for us to do story time at 10:26? But she's up, and I didn't get a chance to read her a book because we just not sorry, that's the other chair. We just not too long picked her up. And we wanted to make sure that we read a book to say goodnight. It's time to say goodnight. It's time to say goodnight. Sariah, it's time to say goodnight. Look at that face. It's time to say goodnight. She's holding the book. It's time to say goodnight. Good night. So, if you are new to our channel, I'm Shay. This is Sariah. We do story time every day live. We missed one day live yesterday, and that was only because she was gone and she was doing her duties with her godmother. And but they still read a book to her because I left a book there, and they still did a book. And I was like, okay, it's late here. It's 10:26 here, so I was like, but we're still gonna read because it's a good night book. So if you are here, thank you so much. So we usually are here around 7:15, and tonight is late, but we're gonna read this book and then we're gonna say goodnight to you guys. And she's super hyped. So we're gonna read It's Time to Say Goodnight. It's time to say goodnight, big girl. What? Okay. It's time. It's time to say goodnight. When the sun sinks low in the sky, winks one last sparkle, and finally goes to sleep. It's time to say goodnight when the birds start to sing, telling each other that they should sleep tight until morning. Sariah, it's time to say goodnight. You can't eat the book. We can't say goodnight to the book. It's time to say goodnight when the poppies close their beautiful flowers and sleep until the sun rises for a new day and they open to greet it. Good night, flowers. Good night, flowers. It's time to say goodnight when the bears yawn. Ooh, and crawl into their den to cuddle up and sleep until sunrise. It's time to say goodnight. It's night. Thank you, Sariah. Thank you for holding that page. It's time to say goodnight when the beady owl opens his eyes, stretches his wings, says bye-bye to his family, and flies to look for their breakfast. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you, Sariah, for holding that side of the book. You're such a big helper. It's time to say goodnight when the cows stop eating and lie down. You got it? You got it? And lie down on their sides or tummies. On their sides or tummies in the grass under the chestnut tree for a well-deserved rest. It's time to say goodnight, Sariah. It's time to say goodnight when the fish in the river stop swimming and stay still or tuck themselves into the holes between rocks, for that is how they sleep. That's how they sleep, Sariah. Are you going to go to sleep too tonight? We'll see. It's time to say goodnight when the sheep huddle together in the little shed in the field. It's time to say goodnight. Good night in the field to keep warm. They lie on the fresh straw to go to sleep, even though they keep one eye open. One eye open to make sure everything's okay. It's time to say goodnight when the spiders stop moving on their webs. Flicker, 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 their eyes and maybe dream. It's time to say goodnight, Sariah. It's time to say goodnight when the otter lie on their backs in the river and hold hands as they drift asleep and stop each other from drifting away. It's time to say goodnight. That's you. That's Sariah. We're going to take her into bed. Hopefully she goes to sleep. It's time to say goodnight when you feel tired. So very, very tired that you cannot keep your eyes open for one more minute. Good night, everyone. Good night. Good night. It's time to say good night. So we wanted to make sure that we said that our good night song. Sariah is still hyper and happy, and she wanted to say good night to you guys on YouTube. So we want to thank you guys for joining us in the small couple minutes that we're here for the good night song. And please, if you are new to this channel, subscribe, comment, like. We are so happy that you're here. We know it's super late. I don't know what time it is where you're at, but here it's 10:32. So, but I'm glad you guys were able to come. So we are going to sing our goodnight song, and we are going to say goodnight to everyone. Good night, Mommy. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Sariah. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night, Jace. Good night, you too. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining me and Sariah as Sariah goes to bed as well. So good night and good night, YouTube. And again, thank you guys so much for coming. Go ahead and grab that goodnight book because it's such a great book to read before you go to bed. And it could be a book that you read to go to bed every night. So thank you guys, and we will see you mañana early at 7:15. So bye. Say goodnight, Sariah. Good night. Say goodnight. Ah! You're on my hair. Ow! There we go. All right. Bye, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.